Mm. Hi, Anusha, how are you?
I'm good. Hi. What about you?
Yeah, I'm glad we are doing this. Like, I had this we call a fireside chat about 2 years ago, then I just dropped the idea. And now I'm looking to relaunch it, and you're my first guest, and I'm really glad we are doing this.
Well, this is exciting. Being the first one is a charm. So I'm glad that we did this, or we're doing this right now. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, a lot of the things that is just coming up to my mind is the whole global economy, how expensive everything is, but international education is so important. We have to keep sending students out there to get that exposure. I can see you're in Chicago, but before we go on, I really love your background, and I think there's some kind of wallpaper or a quote there. Would you mind telling a bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm very big on like my background, not only because it's aesthetic when I go on the Zoom calls, but it's also because for me, I need these reminders when I'm working. So this is actually a whiteboard where I scribble my stuff. Right now there's a bunch of like things to do, programming softwares that I have to learn and all of those things, and that's a fun stuff. But then this one is actually a quote that I heard 6 years ago and from a mentor of mine, and this has still that since then stuck with me. I'll walk you through the quote. It's I found it very powerful. So it says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. It's by Marianne Williamson.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Did someone inspire you with that quote?
Yeah, so I was few years ago, I was working with Omer Jaliawala, which most of us know, who's a well-known trainer and facilitator in the industry. So I've been working with him under his mentorship and in School of Leadership. And while I was just a volunteer and growing as a trainer at the age of 18, 19, so that was some years ago. Um, and that's when I first heard this quote in one of his talks, where I was just shadowing as a shadow facilitator. And since then, it stuck with me. I'm like, this is very powerful. And the way he said it was also very powerful. And since then, I am like, this is going to stay with me.
I think I'm having good fun, but I think I'm tired of mainstream quotation that people use in the scholarship application. I want people to make and find their own quote somewhere instead of going with Vincent Churchill or Nelson Mandela. Nothing wrong with that. No offense.
Oh, yeah.
I'm work really hard, but I like more up to date quote, which is like the kind of that you have there. I was reading one another quote that people had made up, but it was very simple, very powerful, and like how much application should be, right? Is that not
So
interesting? How did you approach your master's? Like, why did you go to decide to go for social work? What drives you here?
So my degree is in social work, but there are two streams to it. Either you can do clinical or either you can do policy. My area of interest is more in policy. So my program is actually not just social work, it's social policy, work, and administration. And you can actually do two streams to it. A lot of people, 60% of the cohort does clinical because that's what they want to do, which means that they have to be trained as a counselor. In the second year, mine is more policy focused. And the reason why I chose this one apart, like not a public policy program per se at UChicago, was mostly because this program has a mandatory field placement component. So you are actually they place you with an organization that fits your interest, and you have to do field placement for 2 years. One year it's a different organization. Second year it's very related to what I want to do. So for example, is in the second year I'll be placed with the criminal justice organization, which works on policy and research. So because that's a mandatory requirement, that's a program of study I am in. So I think that's what gave it a different edge. Also the reason I wanted to go for master's is always like also like I wanted to get that international exposure. I have had that international exposure through conferences and being part of working with international team. But I think it's a very different ball game when you're actually studying somewhere and getting that exposure and experience of working, of doing an internship, doing a field placement, studying and interacting in classroom and understanding what the dynamics are. I've also like, so in terms of criminal justice, we know like there's a lot of room for work in Pakistan when it comes to that. I did my thesis actually on rehabilitation and recidivism in central jail. So I went in there, that was right before COVID. I went in there, I did my interviews, and that's where it sparked the idea that that's what I want to do, because that's what inspired me. But I also realized that that's not something I can do in Pakistan right now. I need to get that exposure from outside.
Was your undergrad somehow related to this, or did you expand or scale up?
So my undergrad, I actually did my undergrad from Habib University. So it was in BSc, like social development and policy. I was actually the third cohort of the grad. So not, it was a bit, it was a bit test and try. But well, things worked out fine for all of us, I guess. So it was mostly on like development and policy and all of those things, a bit more development than policy. But then in my last year, my thesis advisor, we got inspired about like working on rehabilitation, and that's what I wanted to do. So for a whole last year, I worked on criminal justice system, recidivism, and rehabilitation. So we had to go through a lot of permissions to make that happen, because it's not really easy for a student to come into the center and be like, oh, I want to interview, I want to get that data. That's not easy. So we had to do, I had to like go through that trouble of making that happen, which was, I would say like, it was very interesting. I also then interviewed the psychologists, the teachers who were there in the central jail, providing activities, providing those classrooms, and observed those classrooms as well, which was quite insightful to say the least. So I think it was actually my bachelor's that inspired me, because had it not been for my thesis, I think I would not have been very straightforward about like, this is what I wanted to do. And that's also what my application mentioned. Exactly.
Well, that just reminded me how much gatekeeping is there in every field when a student wants to do teacher. I remember when I was writing my master's thesis, I did my master's from Pakistan, by the way, before going for that. I was just going for normal topics like inclusive education, but I didn't know how in Chicago, the whole school administration and teachers felt that, okay, an outsider is coming to interview us and they are going to interrogate. No, I'm not going to interrogate. I'm your colleague, I'm your peer. I want to know in mainstream education, are we focusing on accommodation, or are we helping teachers get the necessary training to help students with disabilities in their classroom? Rather than fixing the disability, we're trying to fix the education system, because the burden of disability is not on the person themselves. That's what
I am so glad you said that, because I think it's also when in my work, like in terms of when we talk about like the justice system, we talk about the problem is placed on an individual, and it's not the individual. It's a systemic problem.
Yeah.
It's a system that places you there. It's a system that does not give you enough opportunities to go back and re-enter into the society successfully.
Yeah.
It's a system that prevents you to do that. It's not an individual. The onus is not on the individuals per se. The individual can do whatever they can give the 110% and still end up where they are, because the system does not allow, especially people of color, to enter this or climb that social ladder. So it's a very systemic problem that exists, and it needs a systemic solution. That's why I wanted to do policy, because it's very macro level systemic change. I want to still interact with the beneficiaries and the stakeholders that I want to work with, so that I'm humble and grounded. And my policy is not like, oh, I want to suggest something else, and the ground level reality is something way different. So I want to keep both of these things intact, but I'm so glad you mentioned about a systemic problem, because we place the onus on individuals, and that's not fair.
Have you had any luck trying to bring a change from this perspective that we are talking? The burden is not on the individual, the burden is on the system. Have you had any luck or be able to make any kind of difference there? Because there's so much negativity around me. I want to be some very, very honest to God story that there is change happening, but it doesn't look like what you are imagining.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I mean, of course, the change does not happen overnight as well. I think people are doing what they can, and they're writing, like from a research perspective, I am now researching on different elements of that and then publishing my op-eds. So that's one thing that I'm doing in my capacity, and like trying to create videos about it and all of it, because unfortunately, as a trainer and facilitator, I was also one person who also said like, hey, you have to take 100% responsibility of your actions. Like I was that preacher, and suddenly I now understand the other side. So I started doing it myself. Like I think it begins from home. So I have now been very careful about what I am doing and what I'm saying. And I've started doing that through videos. I've started doing that through op-eds, like research and all of it, and classroom, the discussions that happen with stakeholders, not only classroom discussions with other students, but also like the internships that I'm doing, like with a crime lab right now I'm doing. So they work with law enforcement, they work with the system itself, and placing my word through. I think that's a start. I'm not gonna say like I'm there. I think there's a long way to go, but that's the goal.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Do you involve the beneficiary, typical in the juveniles and all those dependents and their guardians when you are trying to make rehabilitation program? How should the process work? Because in disability inclusive education plan and say that you need to involve the students when you are deciding the educational future. What about the juveniles? Yeah.
So good question. Unfortunately, due to the system barriers, like when we work on imprisonment and mass incarceration, it's not the access is not that easy. But this, like, because I come from this program and because of the network and the resources that school is able to provide, we do have access to it. So we have like access to the Cook County Jail, to the system. We've been able to go to the bond court and with a professor of mine and understand, like, and there were juveniles who were presenting their cases, whether this should go in trial or they should be dismissed. So this was the whole understanding what the nuances were. It's important. And I think as I move further along in my degree, there's a lot of like one-on-one work that would I would have to do with the juveniles, but it also comes with the access that the school is able to provide. And I am grateful that I'm with the top 10 like school in the US, that I'm able to have that access. Otherwise, access is a problem, especially when it comes to talking about the legal system.
The prison to pipeline, the school to prison pipeline, and the prison to there was whole module in my class where African Americans were all coming to classroom, and I couldn't. We live in a bubble, really. We think we know a lot, but we don't until we are actually in the field. And that is where placement is so helpful.
Yeah, so big. And I'm glad you mentioned this, because the next talk that I was mentioning just before we started this was I'm going to talk with the guest speaker on school to prison pipeline, by the way. And so it's very interesting that you mentioned this. But yes, the school-based officers, the police officers that are present in the school, that's so harmful, because a disciplinary action should not lead to an arrest.
Yeah.
Disciplinary action should lead to probably counseling, like not punitive action.
Yeah.
Punitive, I think one of the things that have enlightened me during my course here is like the punitive approach. And the punitive approach is not only in the system, like it's not only in the criminal legal system, it's everywhere. You talk about parents, right? Like talk about like if someone does something, a child does something, what are they threatened with? A punishment. Like the school system is a very punitive, a carceral approach. So we should not be surprised that the legal system follows the same thing, which is problematic. to begin with. So our mindset, the community mindset, is very punitive. That's also one of the things that I'm working towards. It's like, how do we change that mindset from punitive to a bit more accepting? Because social reintegration cannot happen without, abolishing that mindset. And I think that has a lot to do with my master's program here, because I would not be challenged to think about these different perspectives had it not been the kind of diversity that my school, like the program, brings and it introduces me with.
Okay. Speaking of that, I've never been to Chicago, although it was on my list. But when I'm looking at Boston, California, Chicago, and I'm very much aware that the state laws are very different. One state can be very connected, the other state is less connected. But it reminds me that I think you have chosen your program very carefully. You knew what kind of program you wanted to go for. Can you share something for the scholar community? How do you know which program you need to go for once you have identified your interest for master's? Because there's so many programs. How do people decide which program is good for me?
Yeah, that is a great question and not an easy one, to be honest. I am a very organized person. At least that's how I keep myself sane. So when I started with the application process, I had a whole Excel sheet made. I still had that in front of me, right now, but used to when I still have it in my system right now. So I picked the schools. Before picking the schools, I actually searched what kind of programs there are. So I saw the different, there could be a social justice program, but no, that's not what I want to do. There is an MSW program, but not with this. There is a public policy program. So I had to go through a lot of these pages and I wrote the pros and cons. This is what it does. This is what I need to do. I had a whole list with the application supplementary material. This is what's required. This is what they're looking for in a candidate and all of those things. And then after that, I chose my program. It's interesting because I wanted to go to UChicago since I was 12. I didn't know the difference between bachelor's and master's, but since then I knew I wanted to go to UChicago. So for starters, I only applied to UChicago. I had my backup options with other schools, but I wanted to see what happens. So I'm like, I have enough room to apply to other schools if this doesn't come through, because I have other rounds that I could apply for, but I wanted to see. And also the application fees is a lot. I didn't want to invest in 10 schools. And when I know I can get into one. So I just applied there and it came through. And I'm like, okay, I don't need to apply somewhere else then. But I had my options. I knew what the deadlines were. I knew what the program I wanted to take. And this was the top program that I wanted to go for. So I would say for the people who are aspiring people, who want to get started with the process, know that so write down the keywords. This is what I want to do. This is after I graduate. This is the kind of work that I want to be doing. Maybe also look at the jobs. That's what else I did. I also looked at the jobs that kind of work I wanted to do, and what were they requiring, the skill set that they wanted. I went to back-end I reversed the process. I went with the jobs first, looking at what skill set they needed, what degree are they looking for. And then I was like, now I'm going to match with the programs and the schools that are offering that. So that's shortlisted. So my Excel sheet was based on that process of shortlisting. So that is
I really like that approach, but it's time consuming, but that's how it should be, because people don't want to apply for Fulbright anymore. A lot of different funds, we know that they want to leave Pakistan, they want to avoid Yali and all those many other factors as well. But then I remind them that You have to improve on your skill set. You need to know what skills are being offered and where you can fit in. But it's so demanding. There's no classes. It's so demanding. But I really like that you also went for research education on campus with the lab, because when I was working at Boston University, there was one lab that they did not offer that job for J1 visa. They offer for F1 only. So that was a delimitation for me. But somehow I got to volunteer and get that, because these in-house labs, direct mentoring with professor, I think it has been very empowering experience for you.
Yes, yes, for sure. I think I am very fortunate in that sense because UChicago has a lot of labs. I don't even know how many labs do they have. Like when it comes to like research labs, I'm not talking about the medical research labs, but I'm talking about the work, like social labs and like the labs that policy labs and all of it. I think they have a lot. I don't even know that much, but the top ones are basically crime lab that I'm working with. And they do actually sponsor they do that. They have a pool of range candidates that they want, and they're always up hiring and all of it. So I think it also started with understanding what kind of environment they are working in, what kind of work they do, what kind of candidates do they hire, and also like being working with. So I want, and this is very interesting because this is exactly what I mentioned in my application. I was very sure like this is the lab that I want to work with. And I applied in 2020, by the way. I deferred my admission for 2 years because of COVID. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to do my grad school online. So I did,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So I'm like, I'm not going to do 2 years online. So in my 2019 application for the 2020 cohort, I actually mentioned that I want to work with Crime Lab. I want to take this course with this professor.
Okay.
And I actually ended up doing that in that
We do
semester.
that.
Like,
Yeah.
I took that class with the professor. He's the founder director of that crime lab. And I actually started working with the crime lab because knowing where you want to go, it's very important. You can figure out the chunks and bits and pieces along the way, which is completely okay. You don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah.
But like knowing the big pieces that you want to get to, I think that's important. And even if your answers change when you're in
Yeah.
that process, you're like, probably not this lab, probably not this organization, probably this, and that's also okay. Just because you committed to it in the first place doesn't mean that you can't change it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you evolve as a human being and you learn and you get different perspectives, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting. Did you know all these labs, they were already written on their website? I remember much before that, I was looking at one website of Harvard. Harvard has multiple websites, by the way. I will tell you in a minute how I know that. I mean, there's a main website, and then there's the total lab website, which are affiliated with the university.
Yeah.
And where I was smart enough to figure out that how do I know which program I need to go for? So Harvard is Harvard. Fine, I will, but it did not offer a master's in special education. I mean, that was surprising because Harvard, what Harvard was offering is educational management and leadership with one module in special education. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You're supposed to be leading the world. That is Harvard might have for you. But
Yeah,
Boston University had that too. And then what happened was, because I was in Boston, I was very close to Harvard, MIT, top UMass, everywhere.
that's true.
How I figure out that it's not about the ID status of anything. It's like program fit. You need to know other offering projects that you want to do. So I did end up going for that project while I was in Pakistan, while teaching at Lahore Grammar School. I was working with Harvard project offline. But when I got to Boston, I met the team there, and it was such a beautiful, spin around moment. That is how everything clicked for me, that I made the right
Like full circle.
decision.
It
Yeah,
comes to a full circle,
yeah,
and you're like, okay, I'm so glad that
yeah.
I got a chance to connect. And I'm glad it's very important point that sometimes people go for the rankings, and sometimes people, I mean, of course, it would not want to go. I don't want to like understate the part that UChicago is a top 10 school in the
Yeah.
US, in the world. But then apart from it, I think it's a program that very much clicked for me. It's the program, it's the institution that clicked for me. It's the prospect, like where do I want to see where do I see myself next? That's what clicked for me. I think all the other programs that I looked for, they did not have a program of study that focused on criminal justice system. And I wanted to do that. If they did not have a field placement.
Yeah,
So
that.
I'm like, I want the blend of best of both the worlds, and this is what it's providing me for. So I was very clear that this is what I want to do, and that is why I did not apply for other schools in the first place. But that was not because I was being, I
Not
was,
taking a risk, but
yeah, yeah,
scientifically risk. You were taking the
I
calculus.
had my options. I had my options available, but then, I just didn't want to waste the energy and the money on it in the first place. But I knew, like, if this is the time where I'll get an answer, if not, I had my applications ready for the other ones. So I'm like, if this does not happen, just, yeah, I had Columbia, I had NYU, I had like all these things in my list, and I'm like, okay, these are the top, next Cornell, and then these are the next programs I want to apply to. And I'm like, this is where I want to, so I just had to press the link and just start with the application, like just like enter my application, but I had all the folders ready. So it's not that, you should know, like, what are the schools and what are the programs that you want to apply. You have your top favorite.
Yeah,
I hope you get into your top favorite one, but have the backups in place.
that is perfect. That is perfect. Did you face any setback or any very hard moment when you were going through the application? Perhaps, like I had from my family, like, are you really considering going abroad? And they were like, yeah, Paula, you can go, but another family member, maybe you think about it. And I'm like, within the family, there's so much interesting dynamic. Although both are sisters, both are daughters, why is that the gatekeeping within our family as well? Did you face anything like that or any other thing you faced?
I think not with family per se, because I think they're very supportive, touch wood. So nothing in terms of that, but I did get a question around, like, because when they think about social work, they're like, oh, social work, it's like that stigma. And I'm like, no, I'm doing policy within social work. It's a social policy program. Mine is very social policy related. Of course, the degree mentions everything, but that's not what my area of study is.
Yeah.
Mine is very like criminal policy related, and that's what my work would revolve around. So I think taking a moment to explain them that it's not social work. I mean, social work, they have a very different connotation around it. Like, it's like, oh, you're just gonna volunteer. And I'm like, no, it's not about volunteering in the organization. It's not I'm not going to end up volunteering. I'm going to have a paid job after this. I have like a different setup, but I think I'm explaining people that part. I think it's very different.
It's so tiring explaining your field again and again, especially if it's not mainstream. You're trying to say, no, I'm not going for that, I'm going for that. It's within this. So I would rather people just, go with a simple Pakistani family simplification. But then it's so
Now I just say it's a social. Now I just say it's a social policy with criminal legal program of study. So I make it very shortcut, and I'm like, this is what it is. Understand it yourself.
That is good. That is good. So I think you are the first in your family to have ventured out into the field, or do you have any other family member with similar interest as yours?
No, this is the first time. I'm the first person who's doing into criminal legal social policy and all of that stuff. Like, this is the first time. Of course, when it comes to like social work per se, like, we've been very involved in like in our community work and in all of those aspects. So that's there. But like, when it comes to working on criminal policies, like rehabilitation, recidivism, I am the first one to work. So when I started doing it in Pakistan, my mom was so worried because she's like, you're going to central jail.
Yeah, naturally.
Yeah. And you're like, you're coming with all these stamps in your hand because of the entry and all of those things. And the first day that I came back, I cried. I went in there and I could not take it because I could see the power dynamics that were present, the environment that was there. And I just could not take it. I came back home. I cried to my thesis supervisor. Like, she is the one mentor that I truly look up to. And I was like, I don't know if I can do it. And she put me through, and she's like, we're gonna be fine. And where she walked me through it. I'm so grateful for her. But like my mom was also very terrified. Like,
And
why are you doing it? So now even when someone asks like, oh, criminal legal policy, and they look at my mom's face, because like, how did she end up there? What made you end up there?
I
But
can imagine.
I think it also comes with the personality. I also want to leave this thought to people like who are gonna be watching this. I think the kind of personality that you have will also very much relate with the program that you want
I
to.
think, yeah.
For example, I'm a person who likes to be challenged. I am a person who wants to go out of their comfort zone. If I'm in my comfort zone for too long, I'll recognize it. I want to switch it,
Yeah.
because I'm like, I know if I switch it, it's going to give me a lot of trouble personally, but I'm going to learn, because otherwise I'm going to stay in that comfort zone, and
Yeah.
that's going to be frustrating for me. So I challenge myself. I'm a person who likes to go into that fear, like, that not mainstream, not the cliche fields. I want to do work that has not been explored a lot in the
That is
community
so
that.
important doing the work that nobody is doing,
So
especially
I
for women, for females
Yeah,
in
so that's kind of work that I want to do. And that's a personality that I have. And in all my work that I've been doing. So I would say, like, also see like what are the personality aspects that stand out for you. And you want to see that in your program. That you want to see that in your job later, or in your work later. Even if you open your own firm later, like what is the kind of work that you would want to see doing 10, 30 years ago, later, sorry. I see myself doing advocacy work in terms of like the justice
yeah.
system, and like policy change, and working with policymakers and all of those things, and being fearless, and being out there and talking about it. So that's the personality trait that I have, and I want to show that in my job, in my work later. So I would say, like, match that process as well, because you want to love what you're studying. Otherwise, if it does not give you that kick, probably you're in a you should be in a different.
That is amazing. I'm not going to say I'm inspired because that is very key for me, because in this whole world, we feel that we all need to challenge ourselves and just come out of our comfort zone, because that reminds me change doesn't happen until you allow and embrace change in your life. It's very difficult to do that. But for anyone considering social work, I mean, it might sound like what advice you have, but what's the top thing you often say yourself? Like, how do you know that you should go for social work? Because I remember in the US, we have lots of social work programs there, in Europe as well, but in Pakistan, we don't have that concept very solidified or firmly grounded in theory and practicality. We say social work is tied with law or legality here, but it's not. It's the very social aspect of it, right?
Yeah. So if I understand you correctly, you want me to elaborate more on the work of social work, like what something that people
Yeah,
do not about, like because
yeah,
because I agree with you, social work is not something that's very much recognized in Pakistan. There is no degree per se about social work. I don't know if there is.
no,
Recently, because based on my research, I could not find
I
anything.
don't have any applicants in the last 3 years going for social work.
Yeah, so I don't know anybody. But yes, crim social work has different aspects. Like even the University of Chicago's program that has very different aspects to it. So one of the program of study that I am focusing on is criminal legal system. That's one thing. But then there are 7 others. There's like substance abuse, a social work program. There is one like trauma informed. There is one that focuses on social inequalities.
From
So that there's a lot of like different program of studies that you can focus on, and there are different opportunities for field placements based on it. So social work is very diverse. Like you can be working on, if you want to do case management, that's a very social worky kind of. If you want to do like policy, people don't know that within social work you can actually choose policy or clinical. People just think you end up being a clinical social worker, which is
Yeah.
not true, because you can take policy and you will be, you will learn policy analysis, you will learn all the softwares. I was talking about all the softwares that I have to learn.
Yeah, you
So
have.
like you don't learn that if you're doing clinical. So I think there's a lot of this, it's a wide field. And I still get like, why didn't you choose public policy program? And I'm like, these are the reasons. I'm very sure of like why I want to do this. And if it comes with that label, like it's a social work, so be it. People will see the skill set, people will see the experience, and they'll be fine. I am not gonna like justify my program, the why I chose this, because somebody else does not think so. So if you're very clear of this is what you want to do, go for it. Have your reasons with you. And if you think that this is what you want to do it holistically, so be it.
Just maybe one step back, just a quick rundown. What are the undergrad requirements? Like, what kind of background are necessary for people to go for social work?
So background per se, I think they need to have some form of undergrad within like social development or policy or like psychology. So people, the cohort, the graduate students that I have worked with, like they're in my cohort, they come from a wide variety. They've done psychology, either they've done criminology, either they've done like social work, social, I think BSW, which of course is not offered in Pakistan. They might have done like social development, they might have done policy, they might have also done, very different areas. So it's not something that you will see like, oh, this is very strict criteria. So it's a very flowing criteria in that sense. Of course, should have worked in this field. If you're going for graduate studies, you should have worked in some form of like some experience around it. I think they prefer, and they give scholarships.
Yeah.
They
So you can
prefer.
talk about those experiences in your application and on how the masters will help you get further.
I think one of the things that I could recommend, and I think you're the person for this, but that's like just my 2 cents on that part. I think to be sure, like this is what you want to do. I think admission committee sees like how sure are you, like when you talk and why, and connecting all the dots, right? So having the why.
Yeah.
That book, that's why I smile, because I'm like that book, because connect the dots. Your why do you want to do what you want to do? How does it help you where you want to get to? So having everything laid down, and how does this program bridge that gap? So why and where do you want to go, and how does this program bridge that gap? So you want to tell the admission committee that this is what I want to do. Also reaching out to a professor who's already teaching one of the courses is very helpful. I did that. And I had a chat with them, and I also wrote down in my application that I had a conversation with this person, this professor. So it really helped them to know like this person knows what they want to do.
Yeah.
So I think that's the master's level, that's the word that they're looking at. They want some form of experience. I think that also translates in your voluntary experience counts, internships count, like all of this. I think that also translates in the scholarship that they're going to provide you on a school level basis. So that's one thing. I think your why should be very clear, that this is what you want to do. I don't think so they have like a strong GRE component, like social work does not have a GRE score component. And I am a bit hazy in terms of standardized tests. Yeah, so which is very good in terms of, I don't know if they've changed it now, because that's when in 2020, when I was seeing it, I think that they did not have that. It was very optional. You could still submit it. It was optional. But then so yeah, those things. And I think they also want like a writing sample or a statement, something of that sort, to understand your writing abilities or something of that sort. And of course, we know about IELTS score for international students.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Yeah, that's very helpful. And then telling yourself in the statement of purpose, going for all the programs, like laser focus, don't waste your word, don't waste your time with the admission committee. I wrote a book about that. Please stop using words. Do not.
And stop using quotes. Stop using quotes. And like, I
Oh,
also feel
what does that mean? Yeah.
we
Like,
start with the
can
most
you read my
cliche.
mind here?
We start with the most, I think one of the statement of purposes that I usually come across is like they start with the first two lines sentences with a quote, and they're like a very mainstream cliche quote, or they end up with a quote. And I'm like, this is not an essay that you're writing for your school back in eighth
Yeah,
grade.
yeah.
You don't use your admission committee. They don't want it. They've probably seen this a lot. So
Oh, come on, yeah.
so when I go through like in my job as previous with MCW Global, which is a New York based organization, like before doing my grad school, when I was in Pakistan, when I was working with them, I think my part of my work was to recruit a lot of interns for our Africa program, like the interns that would go in 3 countries in Africa. And we used to get applications, and we used to get applications for our fellowship program, and so many. So like I didn't have a lot of time to like go through the entire application. I would skim through it.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's
You know,
very cliche.
yeah.
Yeah, I find it very cliche. I'm like, okay, this is not standing out for me. Because there were 10,000 applications for our 35 spots in for fellowship, because it's a fully funded New York-based program. So, and not all of us got 10,000. Some like we got like 100 each, but
Yeah.
100 still a lot to go through for one person. So I would just see like what is something that stands out in this person, like, you know, the something that stands out for me. I would then read it in very detail. If they started with a quote and they're talking about all the cliche mainstream stuff, I'm like, I don't know if you're cut out for this.
Yeah.
Then the next process is like interview. I'm like, I don't
You
know
can
if I'm
tell,
gonna.
yeah. I think
Yeah,
as an expert reviewer, you can tell when you skim through if something didn't stand out, maybe none of the other paragraph.
and that's why when and that's when I write my applications for scholarships, grants. I think from that lens, I'm like, the person does not have time and they don't care about me until they do. So how do I make them care about my application? Is like getting that, you know, not talking about mainstream stuff, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. You need to move away from mainstream. I remember I used to pay very particular attention to how a professor is talking in my class. I used to not want to borrow some quote. It can be one line, it can be one word. But moving away from non-mainstream quote, it's so important to really pay attention to how people. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to go for master's in US, wherever I ended up going, because I needed to make sure that I focus on the body language and how they deliver the lectures in their classroom compared to Pakistani teachers and professors. Yeah. Because it's
Yeah,
so
the
important that
pedagogy.
they actually want to teach people, and
Yeah.
that kind of made me mad. And why didn't I get that exposure before?
That's true. You question, I was like, oh, why did I? But then I think about like, I'm so grateful that I'm getting this exposure right now, because there are so many people who would kill to be in this place.
Yeah.
So I feel also, I think it's really important that when you get that opportunity, so whoever is listening and whoever will be listening, if you get that opportunity later, and you get into the program, inshallah, for the program that you want to get into, make sure that you give back to the society. Make
Yeah.
sure that you help out those who are still in that process. And they ask you about your scholarship. They ask you about like your, you know, talk to them. And because one, you were there once and you wish that somebody could help you out. So be that person for someone else.
Yeah.
So that's what keeps me grounded as well.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much, Anusha. And I mean, we can go on, but you have that podcast to get to. And I really look forward. Hope you will share that with us and keep up the work that you are doing. It's very, the word I'm looking for is it's very challenging, no doubt. Challenging for similar justice, and it might make one feel not coming back to Pakistan eventually, but then your scope of work is global now. You can work anywhere once you have a master. And that goes for Fulbright or any scholarship holder. You are not really bound to work in your home country. Your mindset is going global now. Does it feel that way once you graduate from an international program?
So I think that's a very like, I think the world is our oyster, as they say it. That after
That's what I was looking for.
So I think after that, there's a lot of opportunities. I think also with Pakistan, I am sure there's no, I mean, see, there where there's a problem, there's an opportunity.
Yeah.
If there are no where there's no work or data on rehabilitation, then there is like opportunity to do so. There is a lot of programs that are happening in the system that people don't know about. In
Mhm.
Central Jail, there are a lot of like counseling sessions. There are a lot of rehabilitation programs that are happening in the system for juveniles.
Nice.
People are not aware of it. It's not the
Yeah.
common knowledge. It's not common knowledge, but then there's no policy. There is no data available. People don't care about like what happens when they step out of the system and then they're rearrested. Like, why are they being rearrested again by the police in the same when they were just released? So it's very those are the things that we need to work towards. And I think that's what my aim is, like globally, like one day, inshallah, I want to reach to that point that I
Yeah.
could do that
Yeah.
for the country.
Yeah.
Until then, I want to get towards that I have that stake.
I'm sure we hope for the best. Go global, go conquer, and like stay in touch. And there will be some questions coming up once I post on the group. So whenever you get time, you can get to those questions. You can just keep the conversation going for a while. And then
Absolutely.
thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming here. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I look forward for the podcast. Take care. Bye. Okay.